everybody, and welcome back to another week beyond the trailer park. This week, unfortunately, Morgan's still neck deep in final exams, but this should be the last one, so hopefully we'll see her back next week. And Tracy's got mom duty tonight, so she unfortunately can't join us either, but that's okay, because from the wilds of Pennsylvania, as usual, Beth is here with us.
Howdy.
Hey there. And it's actually not winter yet, so I'm okay with that.
Me too.
By the way, your camera's cutting off the top of your head, just so you know. There we go. Excellent. And you know, I don't think I even got what state our guest is from, but Eric, if you can unmute yourself now, welcome to the show. Eric's just using Hangouts for the first time tonight, so it's okay. It's the little microphone button at the top there.
Okay.
There we go.
Pleasure to be on your show. Sorry, I have way too many windows up researching 4 different books at the same time.
Oh my goodness. Well, see, I fixed part of that myself. I have 3 screens now, so I have everything spread out where I can see it. But it's, yeah, not everybody can do that. I understand. It took me a while to set that all up. What part of America do you hail from?
I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is pretty much middle of the country, a little south of Michigan.
Ooh, former Pence land. Ooh, I'm sorry. I have a good friend of mine is in Indiana, and she's would love very much to come live up here.
Get away from all the political BS.
Okay, I think you were lagging a bit there, Eric. Are you good?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
There we go. Okay, excellent. So now, do you prefer Eric or Corvis, or do you what?
I actually write and go by both names. For many years, I started out as Corvis Nocturnum just through online identifying and some of my books, and then later I started switching over to using Reverend E.R Vernor as well through the Church of Satan.
Right. Okay.
Yes, I remember when you had to switch over to Eric. I was like, oh, I'm never going to get used to this.
Yeah, a lot of people still have that issue. That's why I put both names usually, at least on the backs of my books. Right. That way I don't lose my old fans.
Oh, just to put a caveat out there, I've known Eric for off and on for about 7 years. We have a prior radio station in common and some similar friends and stuff. So I know of his work, and he's a very prolific author. He's also an artist as well as he does lectures. And part of the reason I wanted him on tonight is he is a reverend in the Church of Satan. For this out there, the Church of Satan is not the Satanic Temple.
Right, there's a major difference.
Yes, there is a huge difference, and that's part of the reason I wanted him on. Yes. Because one of the things that I have come across in researching the Satanic Panic primarily, and Corvis has been a huge resource for me, is that people don't know what Satanism is. They do not understand the Church of Satan. They confuse the Church of Satan with the Satanic Temple, and yada yada yada. So we're not going to ask questions concerning Satanic Temple. He's not part of that. Right. We're going to focus on, or try to focus on just the Church of Satan and what they are, because they are, to put it bluntly, the original church, Satanic Church.
Right.
Were founded by Anton LaVey back in, 66? If I remember correctly?
Yes.
And so they're the older brother while they do have some similarities, they have vast differences. And I think it's important for us as atheists and, or, humanists, whatever, to understand what those differences are, not malign the Church of Satan or not malign the Satanic Temple because of those different beliefs. And just to be clear, those are not the only two satanic churches within, or satanic groups, churches, however you want to phrase it, within the U.S. Both are what we would call atheistic organizations, but there is theistic Satanism, which is more geared towards what the Christian church or the Abrahamic faith believe Satan is.
Correct.
So, and I even have my Satanic Bible out here. I actually had it for a number of years now. And that was Anton LaVey wrote that, I believe. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, he's the sole author. And it's actually, I remember reading many years ago the sort of the 9 satanic statements and going, wow, I'm good with all of that stuff.
Well, to be honest, our current high priest, Peter Gilmore, says that using yourself as your own deity, the ultimate human being that you try to aspire to become like, is actually the next step above just purely being an atheist. That he jokingly refers to us as atheists.
Oh, that's who. Okay, that's who said that. I remember that. So I remember that popped in because I know I haven't done any current reading or heavy reading on Satan, Church of Satan, but it's just like I remember in something I read that he had said that, but I didn't realize it until he just said that it was Peter that actually said that. I atheist.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, just out of curiosity, because now usually we have atheist folks on, and I always say, were you religious, and what was your story? But now, how would you describe yourself, Eric?
Well, I pretty much consider myself an atheist, and I embrace the philosophy of the viewpoints of Satanism. Basically, I like the spooky Addams Family trappings. I understand through the writings of LaVey that ritual and things like that are merely psychodrama. It's something you use, and actually rarely, most of the members anyway, as a necessary tool like psychotherapy.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And there's a lot of like, you see a lot of that if you're looking in the Satanic Bible. It does outlay different rituals and things that for me it was a little too churchy for me. But I'm kind of the anti-theist strain, so that's why it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And even when I was religious, stuff like that, I was like, why do we have to do all that stuff? Like, that just seems weird to me, but that's me, right?
Well, honestly, LaVey's writing is a reflection of him utilizing occult throwbacks and the power of metaphor and symbolism and archetypes more than anything. And most modern people that read the Satanic Bible and become members, they only see them as occasionally necessary for whatever work they're trying to do. It's not a daily or even annual importance. I'd say, Halloween we celebrate, our own birthdays we celebrate. Well, Purgishnacht is just a maximum day of indulgence at the end of April.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think something you had pointed out to me a couple years ago when I was writing a piece on the Satanic Panic, I had asked you to kind of define, and you had said that in Satanism you consider Satan, the character of Satan, as an archetype.
Correct.
In the Nietzschean will to power sort of way. Could you explain that a little bit more so people kind of understand that?
Sure. Basically, Anton LaVey and modern Satanists use the devil only as a symbol that reflects the qualities that we admire. Pride, indulgence, seeking the finer things. It's basically an iconic idea. Were we living in another culture, another part of the world, we would use something else that people could more quickly identify with. It just so happens that the devil is the most classic example of all the traits that we prefer to point to, for our penchant for, pointing the finger at man's carnal nature and saying, don't deny who and what you are, your feelings, your wants and needs.
That makes sense, because so many other religions spend an inordinate amount of time trying to go against that who we are, basically, and it never ends well.
Correct.
That you see the problems, like look at the Catholic Church with trying to be celibate. Like, no one there are asexual people, but the vast majority of people are not going to want to ever be celibate, and trying to do that, even if you're trying to do it for what you think is an altruistic reason, that goes against like your nature as an animal, basically.
Correct. And look what the damage that has been caused on all the unfortunate untold thousands to millions of children that become the victims of pedophile priests because their urges are denied.
That's right. That's right.
That's one of my fortes. I have 10 more stories to post tonight. Well, concerning that.
Misunderstand.
And it's not just the Catholic Church, by the way.
No, yeah,
not at all. All over the place. But it's a problem with
just
denying your natural urges. Just, I don't think it ever ends well, no matter what, whether it's Catholicism or there are other ascetics, like in the Eastern traditions that practice celibacy. It's just never, I don't think, a healthy or a good thing for anybody unless they're naturally asexual. So, and this idea that churches and other religions get that, indulgence is terrible. Why is indulgence always bad? I mean, you can go too far with anything, religion included, but why does indulgence have to always be a bad thing? I never got that.
Right. I mean, even if you look at the aspects that we like to take the true nature of people and say, well, most of the time in Abrahamic religions that the 7 deadly sins is something that we happen to embrace within logical limitations. Like gluttony, if you take it too far, you become overweight. Then personal responsibility says, well, go to the gym.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, and I think that's what attracts me, for lack of a better word, is that instead of denying personal responsibility, you accept responsibilities for your actions. Everything that you do, and I'll use you as an example because, like, you have this drive. You're an author, you're an artist, you're a lecturer, you're a reverend within the church. I mean, most people would just be like, maybe, I mean, you're working on 4 books at the same time.
Yeah.
What are you up to? Like 17 books now?
You last spoke to me. Now I'm around 34, 35.
Oh, geez. Yeah, it's been a good 3 years at least.
Yeah, I've been doing about 8 a year, but I'm actually forcing myself to slow down next year and only do 7, and half of them, maybe 8, but half of them will be co-written by other people so that I can take a little more time doing the lecture circuit.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I had you on one of my paranormal shows a couple times, and what really, I mean, we all have this Hollywood-esque perception of what a quote Satanist is. I mean, we've all seen. I mean, I've done a couple segments on Satanism and the Satanic, you know, so we have this ghoulish view, and I'll readily admit the first time I had you on, I was a little hesitant, because if you remember, that was during the bullshit phase over at X, and some people were saying some bullshit things about you, and I'm like, screw it, we're gonna have them on anyway.
Well, I do thank the people at Para-X Radio, because Rosemary and Guy Lee, yourself, and multiple other hosts bucked the status quo and had me on as a guest, and I think that maybe not single-handedly, but had a huge impact to how people perceived myself and Satanism after that.
Well, one of the things that, I don't know if impressed is the right word, is that you were so low-keyed, so you presented yourself well, you spoke well, you knew what you were talking about, for lack of a better word. And I think people have this, and this is part of the perception I'm hopefully affecting, is that just like atheists, you know, just like me, I'm no different than anybody else.
Correct. We're more honest about how we think and how we feel, and look at life in a very coldly rational perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, the only thing that, well, I'll use that as the only thing that sets Deb and I apart is we dress differently.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, she has red hair. I don't. Mine's gray.
I have to say,
but that's it. I mean,
go ahead, finish up. You were talking about the differences.
Well, usually people never see me outside of the house without a nice suit on, and they just point at my goatee and say, "Oh, he looks a little scary."
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm an old school goth, like from the 90s. You know, I used to go and scare people at the shopping mall for fun.
We still do it, but it's accidentally.
Exactly. Well, when I was in my 20s, and I used to do a lot of clubbing in Toronto, and my mother would always say, "Aren't you afraid to walk around at night in Toronto?" I'm like, "No, I'm with the people everyone's scared of, so why would I be worried about it?"
Exactly.
But I transitioned into what I called corporate goth for a number of years.
Yeah, and that's what I pretty much have altered myself to. I don't see the point in overly trying to antagonize the mainstream, but I'm still being what I feel is the unique real me. It's just I've traded my leather for, you know, Armani type clothes, simply because I want to fit in when I speak at colleges and universities.
Right. That makes sense.
And I'll readily admit, I mean, the first time I spoke with you, I was hesitant, but I also knew that the backlash that you personally were taking from some was just total bullshit. I mean, and
with the territory.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about it, because I do a lot of writing on the Satanic Panic, and it's just like, you know, you have people like, there's a case in PEA about 2-3 years ago. In fact, I remember IMing you about it, where the couple claimed, oh, they killed this guy because they're part of a satanic cult, and I'm like, dude, no, because everything I knew, it just didn't jive. So I had emailed you, and I said, what's your take on this? And that's the well, yeah, that's pretty much what Peter said too. They're Looney Tunes. I mean, he actually, because of this case, and I can't remember I want to say Haley Barber, but I don't think that's right. I think Barber's the right last name, but not the right first name. But he actually had to write a piece, like a press release, and say, no, we're not associated with these people. These people are not our type of Satanist, so to speak. And it's like, but yet people have this perception that, and that's what I want, you know, I hope to smash. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years. I don't know if I'm making a dent or not, but
well, I do think that it goes back to the old saying that myself and Megas Gilmore and before him, Anton LaVey, have multiple times said over the years, the information is out there. The Satanic Bible is out there. Other books are out there. I've written some of them myself. We've all done thousands of interviews, and we are changing things little by little, because every time we do something like this, somebody does tune in who's never heard of it before, and they go, oh, I didn't know that. So even though we're talking till we feel like we're blue in the face and it's a waste of time, educating people is never a waste of time.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah, it's yeah, you do a lot of good stuff though that way. And for instance, there's this sort of disconnect where people have this traditional, you know, if you even talk about Satan, he's gonna come and damn you to hell and all of this. And to talk about it and to bring it out and be like, no, this is who we are, I think is much more important.
Right. I mean, we stand for ourselves. Our monuments are basically our deeds and how we treat other people. For myself, it's the art and books that I leave behind after I'm gone. That's what I want people to remember me by, is who and how I was. The fact that I was a Satanist at the same time, it's complementary if you really understand the ideals of what it is.
Absolutely. So whenever you give, because a lot of people may not even know, so what would you say the sort of core tenets of would be?
You can find those online. Wikipedia even gets it right. Satanic Bible has it. The 7 satanic statements is something to look up. But basically what it really comes down to is responsibility to the responsible. Take care of your own issues and problems. Strive to be the best human being you can be. You only live once, so make the most of it. Enjoy your life. And, you know, we're pretty much a live and let live society as far as how we look at the world, and not, unfortunately, everybody else feels the same way. We're not trying to proselytize and change the world to become like us, because frankly, 90% of the public out there is incapable of being like us. And that goes for atheists, free-thinking, scientific-minded people. You know, because we look at things logically and rationally for what benefits us the most. And I'm not saying that that selfishness of Satanism is doesn't have any finer qualities. I mean, I liken it to when you're on an airplane and they say, if there's going to be a crash, put your oxygen mask on first, and then the people around you. Yes, you know, that's how we look at we look at life like that, because if you don't take care of you first, you're no good to anybody else.
That's really, really good point. And a point that a lot of people completely miss. In fact, in a lot of other religions, it's, you know, you have to take care of everybody else instead of yourself.
Right.
And again, that doesn't seem to compute very well in practical.
I've even had other pagans come up to me at pagan pride days, and they're like, well, you can't you can't serve other people out of an empty well, so we understand what you're trying to say.
Oh, good. Oh, that's excellent. So now, so you're talking about pagan pride days. So is that a personal thing, or is that something that sort of works in with the church?
It doesn't coincide with Satanism. The only thing we have in common with pagans and New Age people is the respect of certain major holidays. We understand that ritual is important to people as a mental construct, whereas pagans see it as something spiritual and connected to their deities. We see it as something just pragmatic and practical, as a psychodrama, that there is no external entity to be, you know, appeased. It's more about getting things off of our chest. You know, if you do a destruction ritual, it's no different than smashing plates and screaming or punching a punching bag.
That's a really good point. Or yeah, getting one of those old clowns and punching the crap out of it.
Right.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. It just sort of
Clowns are evil, not Satan.
it sort of fine tunes the direction of your emotion, I guess. Would that be a fair?
Right. You know, I get asked to speak at Pagan Pride Days and certain events like Convocation coming up in February, simply because we have similar ideas on rituals and holidays, but I also publish a lot of New Age books as well as non-occult philosophy. And so because I have friends in those different communities, just like I do in the goth and death metal scene, we publish these type of books as an educational means, and because I'm fascinated by the topics myself.
Okay.
Well, that's one of the questions I get frequently is if someone were to look at my friends list on Facebook, for example, they'd be like, wow, this person's confused because I go from you all the way through the whole gamut. I have Catholic priests, I have not Catholic priests, but like you said, the whole point of what you do and what I try to do, I don't know how successful I am at it, but I do it anyways because I like doing it, is to educate people.
Right.
And I think in the long range thing, that's what we have to do. I mean, I have friends in a wide gamut that most people wouldn't even consider.
Mm-hmm.
But because of their activism in whatever way, shape, or form, I'm friends with them, and I think what they have to say is important, and I think other people need to hear it. And I think you do that well, and there's many others that do as well. And I think that's what, even as an atheist, whether it has a religious influence or a pagan influence or whatever, it's still important that we see that other side. And
right.
I get picked. I get picked on because I'm in a Hoven group, which is a young Earth creationism, and part of the reason I'm in the group, besides debate and stuff, is I want to learn people's viewpoints, and it's not going well. But
it's kind of like the idea that you can't be against something if you don't know what their viewpoint really is.
Yes. And that's
exactly
things like study Islam and whatnot, because I need to be able to speak intelligently why I think it's a bad idea. But now I'm curious, what does one do as a reverend in the church? Because we sort of have Beth and I were raised Christian, so we sort of have a predetermined idea of what a reverend is and does. So what is that?
Well, basically, we reflect in our ranking system what we do in the normal, mundane, outside world, as well as how well we are able to articulate and educate people on Satanism to the masses.
Okay.
We're not expected to do anything if we're a reverend for that title. We're not obligated to perform marriages and funeral rites, although we're allowed to legally because of our status. It's basically, I went to Peter's home on Walpurgisnacht, April, several years ago. And this was right after I did the Lexi show on the BET network. And I'd written the book I, Lucifer, exploring the archetype and origins of the devil. And after the partying and celebration was over, he calls me into his office with all the other higher ups sitting there. Oh, crap, what did I do? I'm in trouble. And he says, close the door behind you. And he's standing in front of his desk. And he has this package behind his back, and I didn't know it right away. And I'm, sweating in my suit. And says, we'd like to elevate you to the priesthood. And I'm like, what? And he hands me this envelope that has parchment in it that has my priesthood certificate. And everybody starts clapping. It doesn't dawn on me until like days later. And he says, you've been doing the role of a priest and a media representative for many years, telling people what it is we believe and explaining everything. So just keep doing what you're doing. And, not every reverend is a media rep. Media rep has to be a reverend.
Right. That makes sense. Well, neat. So you're more role would be more of an educator than someone who facilitates rituals and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're able to do both, of course, but pretty much it's a matter of acknowledging and showing respect to your peers or by your superiors that, hey, this person gets it. You know, we're going to give him a raise in rank because he's able to be a mover and shaker in the real world and accomplish things according to LaVey's teachings. And that's pretty much how they spy on you, and you send in news information and post radio links or what books I've come out, and you know, the different various social media groups that they're in, that they notice things. But mostly I just email Peter and say, hey, this is what I've been up to. So you know, it's not like they're actively spying on me all the time just to see if I'm towing the line.
Right. But I imagine if they didn't hear from you for 6 months, they'd be like, hey, what are you doing again?
Well, you know, sometimes it's been a year or two between me getting a hold of them. And whenever I get a hold of them, or I call up the house, I'm like, hey, you know, sorry, I haven't been in touch for a while. He's like, well, we've been watching what you're doing. We just figure you're so busy you don't have a chance to let us know yourself. And they don't feel slighted.
Oh, that's good.
Well,
that's good.
I think with that...
Sorry, Matt.
I think that's okay. I have a lag. I think what it highlights, and I think this was something that you had pointed out to me, is that within the church, it's not necessarily a congregation where there's a bunch of drones, you know, wandering around shaking. It's individuality.
Right.
It's what makes, like you said, what makes you you. I mean, I can look at you, and you're totally different than another friend that I have that is just a general member of the Church of Satan. But she's just as passionate about her role, which I haven't quite figured out yet, but I haven't talked to her in a while either. You know, so I think that individuality, I think, is what is important. And in actuality, you really don't put people up on a pedestal for them to fall off.
Right. I mean, that's actually the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to jockey for position. We're not trying to outdo one another. It's more, and this may sound really odd to people out there, but it's like I'm trying to get into motivational speaking at colleges and places. And one of the things I always tell people for one of the books that I wrote on self-improvement is you're not trying to compete with anybody else. You're trying to compete with the person you were yesterday.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I mean, this is a topic Deb and I talk about off and on in private, is that I think one of the biggest issues within the atheist community is that we put people up on pedestals when they make a mistake and fall. And I know I struggle with this myself, is that it's like, holy crap, I really like that person. Now I'm not so sure what I should think. And we get all discombobulated. But, like, I don't know if you know who Temple Graydon is. She's
not familiar.
She's autistic. She's a PhD. She's fairly well known within the autistic circles, and I love her work. I love how she fought through her autism, and how, you know, and she's a public speaker. Well, then I found out she was anti-vax, which in my world is a no-no. And I'm like, oh, and I was like totally I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I was like, but
it makes much more sense just to kind of embrace everybody's humanistic, you know, this is me as a human, this is who I am, but everybody is a human and nobody's better than anybody else, and that's a good way to look at it. And while I'm here, I actually have a question from Steve over in the chat, although he sent it to me in another format, but it's a little convoluted because Steve can talk, can't you, buddy? But anyway, he says Satanism bracket Church of Satan, seems to be the promotion of human nature and the acceptance of man having wants and needs, while Christianity is the denial of man's inherent nature being a more intelligent animal than other animals. My question is, has he ever had Christians agree with the 9 satanic statements as personification of Satan as the archetype of the exact opposite of Christian teaches? If they don't agree with the 9 statements, then which ones do they find incongruent with what they actually believe about Satan? Did that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. I'll try to be as succinct as I can, although it's a complicated answer. Short-term way of putting it is,
Complicated answers.
I have had a lot of people in clergy, and I did a speech a long time ago at Indiana Purdue University in Fort Wayne, and I've done several others like it, where it was a world religion panel, and I was on there with Catholics, Buddhists, all kinds of different religious leaders. And surprisingly enough, they actually, once they got past the symbolism of what they perceived it to be from their own worldview, once they came to understand what the philosophy truly was, they embraced the aspects of Satanism and said, well, then why do you call it what it is when it's just common sense? And we agree with you on 90% of it, except most of the other religions were, of course, a little more Mother Teresa altruistic in thinking, where they thought we were a little more selfish about it. And I said, well, you're misrepresenting or misunderstanding the idea of what selfishness actually should be. It's basically, don't throw garbage in your own backyard. And they're like, oh, okay, we get it. If I didn't call it Satanism, they'd like it.
Yeah,
exactly.
So they must give you grief for like, well, then change the name or something.
Yeah, we get that a lot. They're like, well, didn't LaVey understand that he was doing a mistake in trying to weed out the stupid people by calling it what it is, because the majority of people all over the planet are going to recoil because of their own preconceived notion? I said, well, yes, it is a double-edged sword. However, it does weed out the people who are unintelligent enough or patient enough to ask the questions of why do you call it that?
Yeah. Which makes total sense. Instead of having some sort of knee-jerk, oh my God, Satan, no. They say, okay, well, what are you? What do you do? Instead of just making assumptions, which is
right.
Great. And honestly, like when I first became an atheist, one of the things that I liked to do was be as overtly blasphemous as I could be, because I wanted to do it as a demonstration that don't be afraid of things that aren't there. I'm gonna go because I was goth girl. I'm gonna go wear the biggest honking cross that I can, and like a rosary from Assisi was one of my favorites, because I'm like, that's some serious sacrilege because I think it's bullshit, but I'm gonna wear this sucker all over the place as a goth chick and be like, hey, look, nobody's smiting me. Like, hey, that was my sort of way of doing that. I have a cross tattooed on my leg, and people are like, what is that there? I'm like, goth thing. And besides, the way I did it, positioned it, it's upside down when I look at it. So there you go.
Well, I think we were talking about this earlier. There's no need for us to be blatantly obvious and get in people's faces and be aggressive. Yes, Satanism is the opposition to organized religion, but that just means that we're rejecting it ourselves. We're not trying to go to churches and burn them down, or tell people, hey, don't do that, be like us, because honestly, there's no point in being antagonistic. We just are what we are, and when we're called upon to explain ourselves in the media because some whack job shoots up the post office and carried a satanic Bible and never read it, that doesn't make us the guilty party.
Well, exactly.
Well, I think again there's that individualism.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense that you are what you are, and in your case, you're very well versed in why you are what you are and what you believe in, and all of us can take that away. And one point you had made to me in private chat was that while, and I'm going to compare it to Satanic Temple, is that while individuals within the Church of Scientology may Scientology, good Lord,
it's science.
I was thinking Peter Griffin for some reason. He popped into my head. But in the Church of Satan, wrong church, while individuals might be politically active, it's not a requirement.
That's one of the big differences, really, is between us and every other major group. Is we're not political activists at all. We feel it's all up to the individual to choose. We have different viewpoints on all the major hot buttons within the Church of Satan, other than like homosexuality, transgendered. We're like live and let live. We were the first church to ever have that public statement of, we have blacks, we have homosexuals, we have transgendered. It's live and let live. If you're a responsible adult, do what you will. Yeah. But as far as the rest, we try to avoid politics in general.
Yeah, and that's what I always found kind of funny, and not in a ha-ha way, but as you said, there's the nut jobs. I mean, Satanic Panic was the prime example of all these, people are doing all this in the name of Satan, and it's like, no, that's not what they believe. And I think that's what drew me to it. When I got out of religion, I went phase, and when I started realizing how messed up he made me, well, not him specifically, but his teachings, made my life, and the aftermath and dealing with that, the more I began to look into the whole issue of the Satanic Panic and how Satanism, specifically the Church of Satan, because Satanic Temple didn't exist back then, it made me realize that it's nothing like even I thought. I mean, and I've always been fairly liberal in a sense with, social issues, but it amazes me that even today, I mean, we're 2017, almost 2018, there are still people, rational people, that have no clue.
There's no excuse in the age of the internet, man. You can get on there in 2 minutes and find out, the basic differences to me, but
unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation and other groups slandering each other. And I don't even really get involved in the this is what we think versus what you think mentality of Satanism. We have the elitist attitude of, we started it, and anybody who came afterward is a pseudo and a wannabe poser that just steals and plagiarizes LaVey's philosophies and twists them to their own agenda. You're either one of us or you're not, and if you're not, don't rip off our tenets and base ideas just to throw in something else to confuse the public. Call yourself something else.
Right. So, and like we had mentioned earlier, there are theistic Satanists. So do you have trouble sort of differentiating from those folks?
Honestly, my problem with theistic Satanism is the fact that it's an oxymoron. If you're truly a Satanist, there is no theism.
That makes sense.
I mean, otherwise they're just inverted Christians.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of Christians, this was a question when you were talking earlier about how in essence you're kind of being your own God. We get accused of that all the time by theists. So are you not kind of giving into that preconception that, well, you're just atheist, you just want to be your own God? I don't think that. I just want to hear how you kind of address that.
Well, we kind of use it as a tongue-in-cheek. What it truly is you're projecting back of your mind of an image of yourself with no flaws, and successful, have everything you've ever wanted, and all you do is strive to become that.
Okay.
Projecting yourself as, there's no other God to tell me that I'm going to go to hell because I don't do what somebody else tells me I ought to. We're trying to push to become the ultimate human being, and that's atheism. That's humanism as of Thomas Paine and people like that, founding fathers of our country that weren't diehard, just pure Christian.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's like, instead of, because a theist will put their God up as the example and say, okay, this is what I need to strive for. And what you're saying is, no, think of what your ultimate self would be and strive for that instead.
Right. I mean, why use the middleman? Well, I understand the Abrahamic Christian idea of God helps those who help themselves. Well, if you're helping yourself, even according to that, you don't need anything other than what you want to become.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Gosh. Well, it's just like some of the 12 steps programs, and I've been pretty outspoken that I don't agree with AA, is that they say, oh yeah, my higher power allowed me to quit. It's like, no, you fucking douchebag.
You did it yourself.
Your effort is... Yeah, exactly. And it always... I mean, that's why I lasted, what, maybe 3 sessions in AA when I first tried to quit drinking. But it's like, no, the blood, sweat, and tears that I put into quitting drinking and quitting drugs, that was me.
Yeah,
that was nobody else.
Why take away your belief in yourself and willpower?
Like, oh, it drives me crazy when I see somebody who is like they've reached their goal of getting a record deal, or they've been signed to a sports team, or they've got their dream job, and they're like, praise Jesus, it was all the Lord. I'm like, no.
The Lord didn't make you. Yeah, the Lord did not make you go to the gym every day. The Lord, or nobody else become successful. It was your own passion and willpower to become better than you were before.
Absolutely. No, and that makes perfect sense. But see, this is where I think your ideology is so much more empowering, because the traditional theistic ideology is, oh, you're nothing without your creator, and you can't do anything unless you supplicate to this God, and they are the ones that give you, like, it's so demoralizing to think that way.
It's very limiting.
Yeah.
When you place beliefs, constraints, or even the successes upon an external force, it diminishes what you are as a person.
Absolutely.
Well, a good example is your artwork. And I was telling Deb this before you joined us, is that because I've known you for 7-8 years-ish, I've watched your artwork develop. And it's gotten... I mean, it was always good, but it's gotten better and better and better. And I wish I had money, I'd actually buy some of it.
Well, I appreciate that.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. When you improve on something, it's your effort that did it. And I think that I still have hang-ups, and I think it's the whole use of the word church for me. But it's like, I could very easily see myself as claiming Satanism, but I have that little hang-up that I just can't seem to get past.
Well, I've got a best friend that grew up Jewish, and he says, I'm not really Jewish, that's just my ancestry, and he's an atheist. And he says, if I didn't care about the title, I would call myself a Satanist. But he says, I don't need to claim to be anything to be who I am. I said, you're being exactly that by not wanting a label.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, the whole ritual thing, I found it to be kind of, I get that sort of gut reaction of like, oh, churchy kind of thing, which is stupid, because like you said, we talked earlier, it can be used as a way to focus your emotions in a potentially a more productive way, depending on what you're doing. Like, it's not that much different than meditation, really. It's just that you're not, you're if you're doing a ritual, you're more interacting with things around you, as opposed to sitting and focusing inwards. But
right. I honestly think that I started out in the goth and occult scene because I was fascinated by those topics and I liked the aesthetic. now that I'm older and I still publish that sort of thing and occasionally write on the darker genre subjects because I always like them. Like I'm finishing up a book on the world history of vampires, but at the same time, I'm writing books on self-empowerment, how to, my next book for February is Limitless, Bouncing Back After Hitting Rock Bottom. I'm pursuing writing a book on ethical pursuit of power, how to get it and use it. And that one I'm actually trying to find an agent and push myself to go to one of the top 5 publishers in the world, like Simon & Schuster. Because to me, Satanism is all about being a life coach for yourself. And if I'm doing it right, then why not teach it to other people and make a better living?
Oh, of course. That makes perfect sense, too.
Yes, I saw your post about your possibility of going to Simon & Schuster. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, it's about believing in myself and knowing my own value after, doing this for 13
a while.
I've anything to myself or other people that I have fans that I can sell of and this isn't diminishing my own publishing company, because I don't want people to flee the ship because they think I don't believe in my own company. I just feel that the topics I'm starting to venture into writing now have a much wider mass market appeal to help more people, and I'm doing those potential new fans a disservice if I don't market it through a larger company that can reach them better than I can.
No,
yeah. Well, it's using the tools that are available to, for betterment of whether you're yourself or your readers, and that's the thing. A lot of people will limit themselves to one format of PR, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I teach online and at conventions, workshops. I've got an online academy on how to be a successful writer. And it's like, if you don't put yourself out there, if you don't try every avenue, self-publish, small press, large press, you're going to rob yourself of the potential of how far you can be a reach for any types of fan.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense.
And there's that individualism again.
It's practicing what I preach. If I want people to exploit every
exactly
success, then who am I to not do it myself?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
You're talking about
and I think.
Sorry, finish your thought, but
I was just gonna. I forgot my thought. Go ahead.
You had mentioned earlier an interest in things like the occult, and that piqued my interest because and Beth and I have talked about this many times. She and I both used to be involved in paranormal stuff, and myself, I was always involved as an atheist. So I'm curious, like, I know how I kind of made that make sense in my head. I'm curious as to how you do that as an atheist.
Well, I just published haunted asylums, sanitariums, and state hospitals. And I put that in the introduction, where I cover at least 60 different asylums and hospitals all over the world in the United States. And I caveat it by saying people have their own preconceived notion when they go there that they're going to run into something that isn't worldly. So that's partly where it comes from. It's partly Einstein's theory about energy not being created nor destroyed. So it's not the conscious human that's left over. It's just their imprint.
Okay, because that's sort of where I had gone with it. It's interesting.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead,
I think
Beth.
a lot of us in the paranormal were like, and that's where I do know Corvis from, is we were on a paranormal radio station, and also I had him as a guest a couple times, and I basically have gotten completely out of it. But yeah. I think as an atheist, I think that's what kind of hooks us in, to use that term, is that, the whole notion of, energy not being created or destroyed. So it's interesting you said that.
It's kind of a merger for me personally, that I grew up with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and I love the Gothic aesthetic of all the creepy stuff, but I approach it from a skeptical scientific mindset and try to merge those together. And I wouldn't go out and say I'm a paranormal investigator, although I've joined people on ghost hunts just to try to see if they're, full of it or not. But, I want to see for myself. I'm curious. I'm not saying outright that it's all fake, but if there is anything, I'd like to be there to see it. And if it does, then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can explain it because science hasn't figured it out yet.
Yeah, no, I was a paranormal investigator for like 4 years. So, and it's interesting you did your book about sanatoriums. So where the pinnacle of the group and actually where the group ended up disintegrating was after we went to Waverly Hills. Which
it's one of the few places I haven't gone to see yet that's famous that I would just out of curiosity want to poke around myself.
It's pretty
and for me, I wrote the book Haunted Asylums based on the real history and the trauma that the doctors were putting the people through. That to me was the real horror. Is what really happened there, and the killings of inmates on inmates and things like that. And then I'm just recounting stories that I heard about that other people wanted to share, and then of course the really awesome photographs of the places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that drew me to that book, and I do have a PDF free copy that you had sent me when I had you on the show, was you did the Buffalo Psych Center, and if people recall, I'm originally from Buffalo, and speaking to your photographs, I was like, wow, I remember that. And parts of the Psych Center are still open, although I don't think any of the original buildings are. There's a few still standing, not many. We haven't been to that area.
Yeah.
And I think from a historical perspective, those kind of stories do draw you in, because as a psych major in college, we got into the history of psychiatry and, how far it has actually come in some cases, not in all. Right. And it's those old-time stories, so to speak, of what went on in the 18 and early 1900s are just atrocious. I mean, right. the stories you hear about lobotomies and as you said, there were some places there were mass killings. I'm trying to think of the name of the one in it.
Last fall, we visited the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
Right, that's another big one.
And what I thought was really great that they did there is there's a section of the first floor that they have turned into a museum of earlier types of quote treatment. So they will show you, they've got mannequins and they'll show you some poor soul done up in an ice bath or somebody getting ready to get in a lobotomy. They've got
right.
Where they would
Allegheny and Norwich, those were the big ones when it came to the hydrotherapy. They used insulin shock therapy,
diabetic,
really barbaric stuff.
Like insulin shock. I've had low insulin and that no.
I can agree too. No.
Just me.
I know how I feel when my sugar gets low and I'm at work and I still have an hour to go and I'm like, oh, I gotta mop the floor. I gotta go mop the floor. Right. Then I had to sit for 25 minutes yesterday because I didn't have the energy to get up the stairs. I live above where I work, so I don't have far to travel.
Sugar is just terrible, like to do that. But you're right. That really is the horror story beyond those places, and putting a light on that, I think, is important just as much as the quote ghost stories that.
That's another reason when I did put out, as Beth said, the Haunted Asylums book through Schiffer Publishing several years ago, but I since then took the book back and republished it myself.
Yeah.
Added a few new places, a ton more photos in the newer copy that you'll find on Amazon now. But in doing so, while I was researching to expand it, I ended up doing a short book that was purely the horrors and histories of what actually happened in these places, and it's got a lot of photos and some articles. Mm-hmm. It's called Madness in the Halls, and I'm just about done with that one.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, okay. Oh, I think that's what I said I wanted to pre-order.
What's that?
I said, I think that's the one I said I wanted to pre-order.
Okay, yeah. I think I may have gotten your order for that one. I'm just wrapping it up.
Excellent.
So my apology for the delay. I hadn't expected to put out 10 titles this year.
Yeah, well, that's an okay problem to have.
But yeah, guys, that's why I'm scaling back a little bit next year, and my traveling to colleges is growing.
Right. One book, that's scaling back.
No, I'm probably down 3 titles, and I'm co-writing some of the ones that I am putting out instead of doing it all myself, because I can't do 1 book a month anymore.
Oh, good. And we thought our friend Rissy was bad for writing books. She's written, what, 5 in the last year?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you go into it full steam, you do it for a few years, and then it gets to you with traveling, radio interviews, running my publishing company, and putting out other people's books. You know, it's a full-time job just doing a couple of these things. So I'm starting to try to figure out what shows should I not do anymore that aren't as successful versus those that are. Focus, a little bit more fine-tuned. Put out, a few less books and put more quality time into promoting them. Do more college speaking, because it pays good and I can help educate future generations on, the self-improvement. I don't have to call it Satanism, but it is.
Yeah.
Tell them how to dress for success and networking skills and read body language, things like that. That's actually going to help them in the real world.
Has that ever been an issue where you book something to talk about that sort of thing, and then they went, whoa, wait a minute, that guy's from the Church of Satan?
That hasn't happened yet. I mean, a friend of mine online actually is atheistic, satanic supporting, and they work with Full Sail University in Florida, and she actually has me booked for speaking for their student body.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I always wondered if that had ever really been a issue, as I said, that's part of the reason why I was glad you accepted our invitation tonight, because I think out of anybody that I know, and I only know a few people that are within the Church of Satan in some manner, I think you put such a good face on it, and people need to hear that it's not this deep, dark, dirty secret. Just because, I get called, oh, you just worship Satan. I'm like, no, I don't, because he doesn't exist. I'm a fucking atheist, you idiot. I mean, I think Deb and I can count on one hand how many times we get called a Satanist during the day. And people think that's such an insult. And to me, I just find it funny. Because it's like, no, these people are normal. Listen,
I'm a big fan
normal.
I'm a big fan of Christopher Hitchens' work, so I've always had that leaning myself, even before I even knew what Satanism was. And I guess I'm doing a decent job being a spokesperson, because Magus Gilmore keeps sending me radio interview links to go answer. So
good.
Until he tells me quit doing it, you screwed up. I guess I'll keep at it. But
I think Peter's made a very good choice in you, and I have heard other people speak as well, not just you, and I think that's what's so important. It's just like those of us that are purely atheist or humanist or secular in some way, shape, or form, or they're part of the Church of Satan. We're normal. In my case, I happen to be gay and an atheist. I mean, the only difference is who I fuck at night. I'm just
honestly,
like you.
I think we're more sane than the other people, because we don't pray to an invisible being that we can't see.
Exactly. Well, and I was just thinking too, because that's that whole, from a theistic side, that whole like Satanists sacrifice babies in the woods and run around naked and all of that crap. Well, maybe they do something, but run around naked, I mean, none of the but has there, maybe I'm not sure how much history of Satanism you've looked into, but has there ever been anything like that? Like, I just keep thinking it's the boogeyman that religion keeps fostering, that it's never
right. I mean, the only thing even remotely close was the before the witch trials in France, where the king had this priest executed and a lot of his nuns because they were fornicating and doing bizarre, blasphemous rituals. But they never said they were Satanists.
Yeah.
Especially not traditionally thinking like LaVey. He certainly, Anton LaVey certainly did not get his ideals from any sort of aspect of the church other than what he found to be hypocritical and use that as his hinge point.
Well, like if you look at the 9 statements here, let me just flip. I should have had the bookmark right there. So, like for instance, and this is where you see the sort of the antithesis of church or religion. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence, which we've talked about. Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. So, in other words, live life now because this is the one you got, and don't sit there trying to figure out what you can get a good gig in heaven because there isn't one.
And I even challenge people that are, believe in reincarnation. I'm like, okay, so let me ask you this. If this is the life you currently have, why are you wasting it?
Yes, exactly. In fact, I got told by a militant Hindu that I was going to get reincarnated by an animal and abused by nasty Westerners, like this morning. So I said, that's a new one. All right. But then it's like Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. In other words, like look for accurate, verifiable information instead of lying to yourself all the time.
Right. I'm a brutal life coach.
Yeah, that's good though. A lot of people need that. I probably need that.
I've given a lot of my classes on self-improvement, and the first thing I did, and there was a good 100, 200 people in the room, and the first words out of my mouth, and I had 2 ladies get up and walk out, because my opening was, if you want to find somebody to blame for all the reason why your life is shitty and you hate yourself, go look in the mirror because the person staring back at you is the reason why. Well, apparently they didn't like that dose of harsh realism and they left. And you know what? The other, 100 and some people loved it and they stayed for the whole thing and bought me out of books.
Excellent. And the folks that aren't willing to do that and maybe accept something that brutal, I guess, are you going to be wasting your time talking to them anyway, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, I've been one of my book reviews on Amazon for Hail Thyself, Unlocking the Secrets of Control, Wealth, and Power. Somebody actually called me the Satanic Tony Robbins. So, it kind of inspired me to keep going with it.
The other thing I found, I remembered in the Satanic Bible that I thought was really, really cool because I am a history nerd. And my preferred period is the Tudor Elizabethan period. And they've got pieces in the Satanic Bible written, and I'm going to probably pronounce this terribly, in a language, Enochian. Is that right? Or
Enochian?
Enochian. There we go. Enochian.
Yeah, it's around the time of John Dees. He created a lot of the writings of the Book of Enoch, kind of when he was talking about the angelic powers and stuff.
Well, for those who aren't familiar, John Dee was an occultist who was I guess, I don't know how you would describe it. He was I guess, medium psychic for Elizabeth I.
Right.
And
He was. If you've seen the movie or television series based on her life, I believe it was. They pretty much said that he was the advisor and counselor, but yeah, he was an occultist, an astronomer. He tried to pick apart things out of the Bible, the lost book of Enoch, the fallen angels, stuff like that, and he thought that their symbolism and that they could have powers to be called upon or whatnot, but for his time period, I guess he was coming from a good place because Queen Elizabeth was a lady not to be reckoned with.
Hell yeah, she is my number one, I guess, hero if I'm gonna have one. Yeah, she's amazing. And I just found it really neat that LaVey would bring Dee into it, because he was, I mean, in those days, everybody believed in some sort of woo, because they didn't know any better. And so he would have, yes, he was an occultist, but I think he was a really interesting figure, and he contributed a lot to things at the time, for sure. Just like, it's an interesting comparison, because also another extremely powerful woman that you did not want to fuck with was Catherine de Medici, and she had Nostradamus as her main advisor in that vein. And if anybody doesn't know, Nostradamus is the guy who supposedly made all kinds of predictions and prophecies and whatnot. And again, even though it's woo, he did make some impacts in his time and was quite revered. So,
well, the Medicis were connected to Machiavelli, and you could say that a lot of LaVey was influenced on Machiavelli, Nietzsche, Ayn Rand, and other philosophers that were pretty much just what we call de facto Satanists, but that's like saying, they were part of the founding fathers of what we believe, right? Because they were elements that LaVey identified with and said, these people have the right idea. I'm going to cobble together a religion, philosophy, rather, in my opinion, based on the ideals and principles of these other pragmatic individuals.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Steve says, watch Da Vinci's Demons, badass show about the Medicis. Yeah, no, I and that's another family I'm fascinated by, are the Medicis, but no, I just, any of that history stuff, I'm just all over it. But that's why I was saying, like, I don't remember in all of my studying of history there ever being anything remotely like the sort of stereotypical Satan worshiper. So it's like this boogeyman.
The closest I could identify with is the Cathars, right after the time of the Templars.
Okay.
The Cathars, yeah.
Cathars, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the closest thing I could point to, other than the incident in France with the Pope and the naughty nun.
The Pope and the naughty nuns, they're saying, they were doing weird unnatural things. It's probably pretty normal, just they didn't, they're such prudes, they didn't know any different. That would be my take on it, but
yeah. They were giving into their urges and got caught.
Which people do. Like, abstinence does not work, people.
Well, to go back to your original question, as far as the perceived view of the Satanists, is that there was an FBI report that came out, I want to say in 96. And basically, the agent said there is no such thing, what people call satanic ritual abuse. And you had pointed out to me in one of our conversations, Eric, about their wannabes.
Yeah, interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah, go.
And because they really, if you look at the Church of Satan, the Tenets, and the writings put out by LaVey and Peter Gilmore, who I'm more familiar with, none of that wannabe shit is in there. You don't see anything about child sacrifices or blood sacrifices. Now, it's not there. That's all Hollywood. That's all satanic bullshit. And 6 years later, we're still fighting
it. If a member of the Church of Satan ever gets accused or convicted of a major felony or child endangerment or anything like that, they're immediately kicked out without any chance of ever coming back. And I think it's ironic that you brought up the FBI study in 96, because I actually spoke to now retired Agent Kenneth Lanning, who wrote that report.
Yes.
And he said that he's a Catholic and was a profiler for the FBI first, And he said he would go in and start analyzing it. And he said, I wanted to figure out what these people were about because I knew they weren't like me, but I didn't want to project my religion onto them. And he turned around and became a firm supporter of us and has stayed in touch with Peter Gilmore over the years.
Excellent.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Yeah, I knew he was pretty adamant about, there not being this satanic ritual abuse BS. And I think, if you look at all the cases, and people have heard me talk about this, the Texas case just now, he's from prison last year. They spent, 23 years in prison for nothing.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to this before. One of the children, and I'm not blaming the children here, is claimed that Chuck Norris, yes, the Chuck Norris, came in a helicopter and did stuff and took the kids away or something. I can't remember the story exactly, but these stories that came out of the Satanic Panic, that everybody has these preconceived notions, are just so asinine. And it's so hard, and this is something I still have trouble wrapping my head around, and I've been doing some reading on it lately, but is that we have law enforcement, whether they be the cops or the prosecutors, who fell for this shit. Yeah. And it's like, how in the world? I was a pretty deep, fairly fundamentalist. I was into Bob Larson, okay? I used to listen to his show almost every day.
Oh, wow. The fact that Fergus Gilmore got in a fight with him.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember
the only interview he's ever walked out of.
Yeah.
Well, that would be the guy to do it for. Larson's a bit loony too.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
he was in the news again today. I gotta
obeying, laws and not hurting people. One of the comments in the chat from Ocean was, what he likes about Satanism is that it was an earlier religion to really understand the concept of consent as we understand it now.
Definitely.
A good point.
There's no sex with children, no sex with animals. And somebody in the hierarchy actually made a joke once a couple of years ago when I met him in D.C. at a big gathering of the hierarchy, and he said, all these people that talk about the wild sex parties and naked orgies, he's like, somebody gave me the wrong pamphlet because I haven't been to one of those yet.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like the whole thing where people say that atheists have no morals. And they're like, oh, look at our prison population. I'm like, yeah, it's 0.07% atheists and the rest are some form of religion.
Well, they're trying to find religion or make an excuse about it. You ask most convicts, Black and Hispanic especially, are really big on the Virgin Mary and things like that. I'm like, if you believe so much in your good book, why the hell are you in prison?
Exactly. I'd love to see what the statistic, if there is one, for members of the Church of Satan being in prison, because I bet you it's probably as low, if not lower, than, because all the people I know, it's like, no.
It would have to be zero, because as soon as they get convicted, they get kicked out, right?
Right.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Be zero.
I never even thought of that.
Yep. Not gonna happen.
From the Satanic Panic to now, we cannot afford any rotten apples in the barrel, making things worse for us.
No, absolutely.
Honestly, the people that started the Satanic Temple, one of the members is Reverend Shane Bugbee, who was kicked out of our organization because he was such a rude, drunken imbecile at one of their bashes in 2006, I believe it was. During the Omen coming out and everything, they had a big get together in San Francisco in the 6606 party. And he made such an ass out of himself, they kicked him out. So he ran off with a bunch of other people and started up the Satanic Temple. It was just a big publicity stunt. It just happened to grow too big for them to, contain. And then it became a political activist group, whereas we are not.
Right. And that's an important point, because as you say, you're more of a everybody do your own thing as long excuse me, as long as you're not hurting anybody, you know, you do you, we'll do us. So the politicizing isn't really your thing, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So that's one huge difference, is that Satanic Temple is very much a political organization. They target, you know, specific political ideas and specific like courthouse 10 commandments and things like that. You guys, you just do your thing, and you're focused on the improvement of the individual.
Well, why should I care what somebody else wants to do on their Sunday morning? I'd rather sleep in or wake up early and write a book.
Yeah. And I could see it from your point of view that if you work to improve the individual, then by default you should improve society at large, right?
Yeah, you're a living example of what to do to be prosperous and happy. And if the ripple effect is other people follow your example, no matter what their religion is, you've done your job as a human being, making the world a better place, at least 1-2 people at a time.
So the question I have now, was Satanic Temple in any way related to Church of Satan at all, or even to LaVey?
LaVey was dead many, many years before the temple ever came about. The only thing that is similar is they copied and plagiarized their website off of the Satanic Bible to make people think they were us.
Ah, okay. Okay, so they weren't ever a part of the Church of Satan. They've always been their own thing.
Yeah, other than Mr. Bugby, you know, being a former member and, you know, wanting to work with the other couple founders and say, hey, let's use this as our scapegoat. Right. You know, it's a joke.
That brings up another question Beth and I were talking about, because she was saying that, you know, a person just can't go and give money and be, oh, I'm now part of the Church of Satan. There's a little bit of a process involved.
Well, Peggy, the high priestess, Peter's wife, actually told me that they've mailed checks back to people with a nice letter saying, we don't want your money, we don't want you. And it happens a lot more than you think.
That's good though. I mean, you know what your standards are and you stick to them. So what would earn someone such a letter? Is there anything like, you know, I mean, obviously if they've been because of your stance on crime, I would imagine if somebody is knowingly has a huge criminal record, be like, yeah, no, thank you. But in general, is there, like, what sort of things do you look for?
I'm not part of the council that decides that, so I don't know for sure, but I could speculate based on, you know, conversations I've had and just the common sense of, you know, if you're known to be someone who posts things on social media that is contrary to Satanism, or your known associates are majority atheistic Satanists, or, you know, you're pro something Abrahamic religion, you know, that's obviously going to make them think you're not a good fit. Criminal activity or even alleged criminal activity would make them steer clear of you.
Okay, that's fair. And another question from Ocean, does the Church of Satan take any legal steps to make sure their legacy is under control, such as doctrine in their legal documents or requirements for leadership?
I'm not sure what they mean by the leadership part, but we do take legal action if people are blatantly plagiarizing and reprinting the Satanic Bible.
Right.
Because those are copywritten, just like you would any other person's written book. I mean, I have the same problem myself. A lot of authors I know, their work gets downloaded as a PDF and then it's free online, you know, sort of thing. That's just taking money out of people's, you know, pockets and food off their table. But as far as the rest goes, we are quick to defend ourselves in the media when it comes to defamation. And of course, unfortunately, the war between the Church of Satan and the Temple of Satan, we always have to go around telling people we're not them, because they have such a bad reputation of deliberately yanking people's chains, to doing illegal activities, being disruptive, you know, just blatantly
one of the
not being
that people got upset about was they call it the pink mass. I think it's one of the big ones. And if anybody didn't,
what may surprise people out there listening is the Catholic bishop where the university was where they were going to do their mass. Peter Gilmore and the local bishop were siding together on saying that it was ludicrous and offensive that the temple wanted to do a public display of their version of the mass on campus. I believe that was in Boston, Harvard, something like that. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was all over the news.
I was thinking of the one where they went to, I think it was the mother of, or the wife of Phelps, the Westboro Baptist guy.
Oh, yeah. I remember that too.
Yeah,
right. And it's like, you may not agree with the West Baptist people, and I certainly don't. I think they're horrible human beings, but why go out of your way to do something so disgusting? It doesn't do anything except lower yourself to their level in the eyes of everybody else.
Right. Oh, Ocean's clarified. He says, what I meant by requirements for leadership is things like protection against corruption in the church, such as a protection against someone changing the Church of Satan to something fundamentally different.
Well, I would think at the years that they scrutinize everybody, that if there will be a replacement for the current high priest, it's going to be pre-selected and voted on by the Council of Nine. We hold ourselves to high standards. That's pretty much a given, being Satanists, and we have pretty strict code of morality in the Satanic Bible of how to behave. You have to put in many, many years as a public media spokesperson, because that's how Peter himself became so involved. He became a reverend under LaVey. They were close friends, and they had so many good conversations over the years, and he became very proactive in answering questions in the media. That it was only par for the course when Blanche Barton stepped down after LaVey's death that they appointed Peggy and Peter to be the high priest and high priestess because they were the most qualified for the job.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, as far as scandal within the church, from any of the research I've done, I have never seen anything that would even approach any of the scandals that we see in the news today. So I think out of any organization, the Church of Satan has done a pretty damn good job keeping within their tenets and keeping their people, for lack of a better word, in line.
We monitor ourselves. That's the thing, is we know what it is to be a respectable human being as an individual, let alone as a group. So, that's why we're so quick to banish people who step out of line, who are first-level Satanists, who don't really join for any other reason. They slip through the cracks of scrutiny, because we can't afford to have troublemakers in our ranks at any level that they happen to be at, because we've faced so much adversity since the 80s forward.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing is, and maybe a lot of people don't think about that, is that you've had an uphill battle from day one and continue to do so because of the invisible boogeyman that everybody keeps propagating.
Right.
It's, there's a Satanist in under the bed instead of a monster kind of crap, and it's
ridiculous. Very much.
So it makes sense too that you would be a little more discerning and of just anybody who comes along and says, oh, I want to be part of the Church of Satan. It's like, okay, well, are you a good fit for us? Because we have our
standards.
Well, and
Jesus, Satanists with standards?
Yeah,
that doesn't compute.
You were saying earlier, the church does not have the stranglehold on morality.
Yes. Yes, and you can't have somebody that doesn't bring fresh babies to the barbecue, right?
Right. I mean, that's not what they mean by baby back ribs.
No. I always have fun with that joke because it's just so ridiculous. I don't think anybody's ever done that. So,
well, someone did try to shove a baby in a microwave allegedly this week.
Oh, lordy.
Yeah. Although I've heard conflicting stories on that one, so.
Well, I know we did start a bit late, but I think it's about time to wrap things up because Eric's a busy guy and it is getting a bit late. So again, thank you for joining us. We definitely appreciate you taking the time out of the 5 billion things a day you see.
Well, thank you, ladies. I really enjoyed it. You guys are always a wonderful host.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And I do appreciate you coming on because it's been nagging at me for about 6 months, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take a chance.
Let's do it. Is there anything else you want to touch on or anything we've got all your stuff in the show notes, but if you want to plug your books and anything, please do.
Your artwork.
Well, people can reach me at corvisnocturnum.com, but they're more likely to get a fast answer from me if they follow me and message me on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter, but I probably spend more of my time on Facebook of any social media.
Okay, and that's your artwork.
Well, I'll be posting more pictures in the coming few days. I've got the one of Krampus I'm finishing, a black dragon. I do a lot of landscape.
I want to see the dragon.
Ah, well, let me show you what I've got so far of that one.
See, ooh.
Oh.
Ooh, hello.
I knew you'd like that.
It's over 3 feet tall, so it's difficult to get into focus.
That's almost as big as me.
You're not that short.
Well, no,
Corvis, is your artwork on Dark Moon Press at all, or just on your Facebook?
No, it's available through Facebook only, and I'm slowly adding it to my personal website. Okay. I do an awful lot of custom work for people. They send me photos that they want me to do a family portraits, or they throw at me ideas that they want custom done of fantasy or erotica pieces. So pretty much I'm fairly negotiable. I stretch my own canvases and I'll do up to 4 feet, or I'll if I have to roll it as a mural, and I can staple it to the wall, sort of thing. So any size, pretty much.
That sounds like fun. Excellent. Well, again, thank you.
I've done about 600 pieces that are all over the world, so pretty much anything is open.
That sounds awesome. And the dragon was pretty awesome. And those of you who are just listening on the podcast, you are going to have to go to YouTube and click through, and it's almost at the end, so you don't have to look too hard. But you can see it is really, really amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much, Eric, for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And I know, and I'm sorry you kind of had a bit of a bang up the other week. I hope you didn't bang yourself up at all.
No, physically doing quite well there. We got some help, and the car is repaired and everything. So I wanted to say thank you to everybody who contributed to that.
Carrying that around for you. Glad you got that taken.
Other than writing some books and occasional podcast, I'm pretty much done with this year until February 26th through the 28th, where I'll be in Dearborn, Michigan for Convocation, speaking on Satanism and related topics to the pagans.
Well, you're going to have to get yourself a passport and come on up here, because I think my local group at some point would love to hear you talk too. So.
Well, thank you. And that's another thing. I am willing to travel. If stores, universities, or whatnot, different organizations want to have me come speak, they can get a hold of me by email or Facebook to arrange, the particulars of how to hire me for that.
Got some of your stuff out on YouTube as well. I watched a couple of your videos, and he goes even more into detail about some of the things to do with the church, and you talk about some paranormal stuff in some of your videos. So there's some interesting stuff out there too. So you can go check out his channel there too. Excellent. Oh, Beth, where can we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, Dune998. That connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos. And I am working on a new piece, which is, I'm surprised I have any hair left. Oh, I love conspiracy theories, especially when they make no sense. But yeah, that connects to my blog, and that also connects to Facebook and YouTube, both of which are under Beth A. Hambridge.
Awesome. And you can always catch me on Holy Crap, the Vlogcast, which airs at Sunday mornings at 9:05 a.m. Eastern, at 9:05, at 12:05 a.m. Eastern. Gosh, because I just had in my brain where I'm going to thank Atheist Talk Radio, so I'll get back to them in a second. But 12:05 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, holycrapthevlogcast.com, hosted by Shuj and Tribble and our motley crew of folks from all over the globe. And we'll talk about all kinds of things, secular, atheist, skeptical, whatever Shuj has in his mind that day. So that's holycrapthevlogcast.com. And I did want to give a shout out. Back in August, we had Maddie and Hertzy on from Atheist Talk Radio from Minnesota. And I had the distinct pleasure to be on their show yesterday morning as like actual radio, which I couldn't swear. And I only said shit once. So it was for that. And they said they had bleepers. So I was like, yay, bleepers. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, ladies, and I even managed to be up and alert at 10 o'clock in the morning, which isn't easy for me. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And lastly, before we go, just want to talk about, as we always do, the Whitefields Educational Foundation out of Utah, who provide counseling for people who have left or are leaving religion, and the Taylor Scholarship, which was started by David Michael of my Book of Mormon podcast, and they provide funding for people who would like counseling but are unable to afford to pay it on their own. Whitefields is pretty darn reasonable, but we understand that there are folks that's just an expense they can't do. So if you want to donate to a worthy charity, we recommend them. And you can find them at whitefieldseducational.org/My Book of Mormon podcast. I have a new show in the works, but I'm only going to drop you a breadcrumb because I don't have anything out yet, but I hope to have it ready to launch by Christmas. So keep your ears peeled, especially if you have an interest in Islam. So I'm just throwing that out there. And that should do it. Next week, of course, back same time, same YouTube channel. And we will be talking with Dr. Richard Carrier of Mythicist fame. He has written many, many books, not only about the historicity of Jesus, but on proving history is one of his great books. And we're going to talk to him and a little bit about why the idea that Christmas is in December is bullshit. and another new app that will help people who want to, if you're stuck in a debate to do with whether Jesus was a historical feature, there's a new app out that will actually codify all of the arguments that you can pull up an argument, lickety split, have it right on your phone. So we're going to talk about that with Dr. Carrier as well. So that'll be next week. And until then, we will leave you, as always, with our Human Creed for Mankind from Dave Foda, and we will see you next week.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.